everyone for tuning in to yet another episode in which I talk about issues related to public transport. Uh, I know this is the wrong time for this. It was supposed to be an hour ago, but I had a meeting. If you're on Twitch, if you're on YouTube, it doesn't matter. I always upload late. Topic for today is me talking about, mostly just answering questions about Mainline Rail in general, and I'm going to start with what Toronto Tour Gaming has been asking me for several weeks in a row, and I never managed to get back on this because it was always about something else, which is the issue of rolling stock on the RER, on the RER. So what I mean by rolling stock on the RER is that Paris has Europe's largest urban rail network, especially largest urban mainline rail network. I think if you include all urban rail ridership combined, Paris is still ahead, but it's not that far ahead of Moskva. But Moskva is largely the metro, and of course, metro is spelled like this. And in Paris, it's actually split nearly evenly between the metro and the combination of RER and Transilien. So very large network with 5 distinct trunks, of which 4 don't share tracks with anything else. I guess 2 of them share tracks with each other. The RER B and D do share tracks through the core, but only one section between Gare du Nord and Les Halles. And at both Gare du Nord and Les Halles, they have separate platforms. So they managed to squeeze 32 trains per hour through this shared section, just because it's a short shared section, and the platforms are dedicated. Very high ridership, and so there are many bespoke elements to the RER, just because it's such a big system. The only thing in Europe that even comes close to it, I guess there's the London system, but the London system has many disjoint lines that are not nearly as self-contained. So if you're looking for something that's a distinct RER or S-Bahn type system, the second largest is Berlin. The Berlin S-Bahn had, before Corona, I believe, 500, maybe almost 500 million annual riders, and the combination of the RER and Transilien is, I believe, about 1.2. 1.3 billion or something like that, 1.2 billion. So it's so there's a lot of bespoke shit in Paris, and the rolling stock is particularly that. So most smaller S-Bahn systems have kind of standardized on a kind of rolling stock. Some of them are single level, some of them are bilevel. It essentially depends on how urban versus regional you are. If you're urban, you should be using single levels. This is seen in, for example, Tokyo. In Tokyo, practically all of their regional trains, all of their commuter trains, are single level. It's not because they cannot physically run bilevels. They can, and they sometimes do on the green car. Green car is Japanese for first class. Why? Because in the green car they have fewer passengers. That's the whole point of first class. Lower seating density, so the passengers in the green cars can still get out fast enough. But if they ran bilevels on the standard class cars, the equivalent of second class, or coach if you're American, these are legendarily overcrowded. And if you're overcrowded, you may think bilevels give you more space, and they do, but they also make it much harder to exit the train at the main station or at the urban station. And if you have such urban stations as those of central Tokyo, then you probably should not be running bilevels. So the Munich S-Bahn is rather urban and is single level. The Berlin S-Bahn is single level. I don't know if they even have space to run bilevels where I live. In Munich, I think that if they cared, they would have done this in the 70s. Zurich, on the other hand, is largely bilevel, because the Zurich S-Bahn is more of a combo of both urban and regional. But even they're making plans to have fleet segregation, in which the more urban lines, the ones that are designed to get you from Oerlikon to Hauptbahnhof, things like that, or to get to the airport, they should be single level, and then the farther away lines, the ones that go well past Winterthur, the ones that go to the Gold Coast suburbs, things like that, and the ones that go to Zug, Luzern, Schaffhausen, these should be bilevel. So that is the normal way you do rolling stock on commuter rail, on regional rail. And it is unfortunate that instead of doing the kind of standard product, first of all, Paris loves its bilevels, and second, they buy bespoke shit. So what I mean by bespoke shit is there's a kind of train that exists on one line in the world, which is the RER A, which is this. And I will see. I never remember where I can get the best picks. This is very not the best pick because I want you to see the side, not the front. Which does mean French Wikipedia is likely better for this. Yep. What happened to the pick? There was a pick. Okay, here's the pick. So this is a car of about 22 meters, three very wide doors. These are called triple wide. It's actually pretty standard to have 2 double wides. 3 triple wides is a lot of egress capacity, and you might tell that these are bilevel. Despite the fact that there's so much egress capacity here, these trains still cannot unload as fast as they need to at the core. Shortly before Corona, they announced it because the ridership was getting too high. The busiest section between Les Halles and Aubert had so many people getting off and on that they could not guarantee their, I think it was supposed to be a 60-second dwell time at rush hour, and they had to go higher, and if you go higher, then that increases the minimum interval between trains. They used to be able to run a train every 2 minutes in the peak direction, and this was cut to a train every 2 minutes 30. Just because of the egress capacity problem. So this is the first problem. They're running bilevels on a very urban S-Bahn or RER type system. These trains, again, they fit when you have a more regional system rather than a more urban system, because a more regional system, first of all, people are on the train for longer, so it's more important to have more seats. And second, it's less important to have the capacity for turnover. And the RER is entirely about turnover, especially the RER A. You see, the RER B and D, as I mentioned before, they have dedicated platforms between at Gare du Nord and Les Halles, which are the busiest stations on the RER B. On the D, maybe Gare de Lyon is also there. And then, but shared tracks, and this essentially means that they can spare slightly higher dwell times. And of course, the irony is that the RER B is the only one that runs single levels. So yeah, the RER B can not consistently, but generally fit within a 60-second rush hour dwell at Les Halles and Gare du Nord. But that's still, but that's the line that maybe needs a little less than the RER A, which has this just 2-track section, every 1 track in each direction. Each track has a platform. Nation, which is residential, is okay, and then the massive people get on at Gare de Lyon, and then again at Les Halles, transferring from all the other lines. The job distribution in Paris is not as central as you would think. It's skewed to the west, so the Paris central business district's peak job density starts well west of Les Halles. It's around this. Like, I'm vaguely depicting the peak job distribution in Paris right now. And the center of that is Aubert. And then just outside it on the west side is Étoile. So lots of people get on and off, and they need the turnover capacity. Now at the RER, oh right, I can't click links. One of these days I will remember. One of these days I will remember. So the RER yeah, has similar rolling stack. And that's not a good idea either, but the RER at least is more regional. People are expected to come from farther away, it's not the other. I remember it's like in the city. It's basically the express version of the of Metro Line One. In the same, New York has local and express trains, and the ORA is essentially the express train version of Metro One, and the ORB is in many ways the express version of Metro Four. The OR says somewhat of an express version of Metro 10. As it happens, Metro 10 is the least important and least busy in the system. The OL says likewise kind of a garbage line, and which you can literally see where it goes. It's entirely on the left bank. The jobs are not here. The jobs are here. Yeah, there's the Latin Quarter, but that's for tourists. And there's GCA, but I don't think the OL even stops at GCA. So yeah, not the best. And so the problem with the rolling stock is, first of all, again, they are using bilevels where they shouldn't. They should be using single levels. And second, it's bespoke. And I don't just mean three-door bilevels, which is bespoke in the sense nobody else uses it, and thus it is much more expensive. The acquisition costs of these bespoke trains are markedly higher than those of comparable trains elsewhere in Europe. Unfortunately, they like bespoke designs even when it's vanilla bilevels, as on the... they've had these orders for the RRD and E, which are just... They think they needed to spend an extra 70% just on design, because nobody else makes that. Part of it is French industrial policy. I think people in France understand that French industry is uncompetitive. France is one of the most deindustrialized countries in Europe, in contrast with Germany and Italy. By the way, people in, I think both France and Germany have this mentality that it's more advanced to work in industry than in services. But let me check for a sec. Manufacturing, employment, World Bank. Employment and industry total. This is percent of total employment, not GDP. Now, okay, this is the global percent, but I don't care about global. Let's do Italy, and then I can just do it through location. So, as you can tell, there's a lot of deindustrialization out there. It's not just outsourcing, because often third world countries are doing the same thing. It's called premature deindustrialization. So let's just look at the biggest one. Poland, maybe I want the Netherlands, Sweden. What else do I want? Czechia and America. And I believe from this set it's going to be Germany then Italy. I guess Poland and Czechia also are going to be very high. Yeah, no. Czechia, then Poland, and people say, oh, right, and these countries are converging because of their industrialization. Sure. And Italy, look, Italy is basically even with Germany. Usually when I think of a very high-performing European economy, or Western European economy, I don't think about Italy. Nobody thinks about Italy. People, if anything, underrate Italy, because it does have very good construction sector. They have very good engineering. But their manufacturing... and meanwhile, you have France here. Sweden is even more deindustrialized. This is something I did not remember in the same sort of the Netherlands. I guess Sweden has I guess the mining jobs. When you think of industry in Sweden, I think you think about Spain just crashed in the recession. But again, look at Italy. This is something that coexists with economic stagnation. So it's not somehow better or more moral to be here than to be here, but France thinks about this constantly. We see this everywhere. We see this with military procurement, where France could have bought Leopard 2s like everyone else in Europe, and instead it's insisting, first of all, it has its own tanks, and second, to join kind of the next generation of the Leopard, the Euro MBT or the main ground combat system, it has had to be a partnership in which some of the manufacturing must be done in France. France has this kind of industrial policy that is desperate to keep this 20% as if that's going to improve its economy when, yeah, Germany has a lot more industrialization, but so does Italy. Um, and if you're thinking I'm just unfairly slagging on Italy, something like, let's do the same set of countries. I'm gonna omit the United States just because the United States works way longer hours and is way richer than all of these. Per hour, the U.S. is basically Germany. And France, but I mean France has high unemployment. Neither the U.S. nor Germany does. Yeah, so yeah, France recognizes it wants to be in this set of countries, and yeah, Germany is more industrialized. But remember, Sweden, and the Netherlands are less industrialized than France. And if you want another big industrial power, yeah, that's Italy. You do not want to be here. I mean, maybe you do if you're Poland, but not if you're France. So so a lot of it is French industrial policy. It's similar to the United States, by the way, which is desperate to prop up this 20% that it has. Um, Again, Sweden. In case you think that it's somehow inegalitarian to have not a lot of industrial jobs, again, Sweden. And so the upshot of this industrial policy leads to similar results as in the United States for rolling stock, which is you get bad trains at inflated prices. Um, the rest of Europe is happy paying something like $100,000. I don't remember it in euros. Like it would be 70 or 75,000 euros per linear meter of single level train. I never remember the cost of bilevels. All I remember is that it's the same per seat as a single level. And in France, yeah, add 70%. This is essentially the Parisian LOL issue. Emphasize LOL because subway systems, metro systems, are a lot less standardized, and therefore, when you buy standardized products for them, there's still a lot of customization that has to be done, and the vendors know this. So let's call this train the Movia. This one. I think this one is called Alsta Movia, but whatever. This train is run by people who understand that everything is a little bit different, and therefore, you can even run a Movia on as both subsurface and deep within the tube, and these are very different loading gauges. You can even see, just let me hover, this is the S stock, this is the 2009 stock. You can see that they're very different from each other, and aesthetically, the Vic is like the other London lines because of the loading gauge issue. And so, because of that, the customization doesn't hurt as much because it's generally along the same lines that it already exists among the range of customers. Because again, metros are just less standardized than mainline rail. Now the Americans demand even more customization than the usual, and the customization is mostly what was good for my grandfather was good for me, so give us 1990 stock. I mean, which would be... The example I keep giving is if I really want to buy a BlackBerry torch. I don't mean buy a vintage BlackBerry torch. I mean let's say I need to get, let's say I'm an employer at a big firm, not big like millions of workers, like 1,000, 2,000 employees, and I want to do joint electronics purchasing, and I like BlackBerry, and I'm not going to get and for some reason instead of just getting the most recent BlackBerry, which I think is just an Android with a BlackBerry keyboard or something, I go to BlackBerry and say, hey, I really like the torch. Can you keep making me the torch from 2011 with your own BlackBerry operating system and the BBM instead of apps? Yeah, please. Like, you understand that I'm not going to be able to get that, or if I do, it's going to cost at a premium, right? Even though technically the stock is older and inferior and I guess easier technology. Yeah, okay, so it's possible that I'm just slacking because of what I know about New York and maybe Boston. But I will say that in the United States they really like doing trains that don't have open gangways, and for the most part the rest of the world has already transitioned to open gangways. In New York they're just starting to test open gangways. It's not, essentially New Yorkers don't really believe that the rest of the world exists or has anything to teach New York, and therefore they want to test it in the city, losing another couple purchasing cycles instead of just buy what works for everyone else and trust that Alstom and Kawasaki and whoever and Siemens are just way more experienced at this than certainly anyone in certainly all of the honchos at New York City Transit, possibly everyone at New York City Transit. Ooh, nice. Ooh, that's cool. Yeah, okay, so anyway, that's the Parisian rolling stock issue. Um, are there other questions about mainline rail? Because I don't want to drift too much toward metro related issues. Um, like here's a and again, I do want to point out that there's more standardization generally um in mainline rail than is. Siemens has never built a metro train for the U.S. Well, buy one. These people are experienced at this. Like, it's not like stop trying to demand that someone else buy in the same country. It's the same thing with same thing. Just buy Stadler, CIF, things like that. I mean, yeah, and never impose your own special rules on them. Remember, unless you're one of the top dogs, and if you're America, you're not. Then buy what everyone else has based on the same rules that everyone else. That's what Paris, I think, got wrong. They think that because they're the biggest in Europe with this, they can dictate rules to a much larger extent than they actually can. With the rolling stock issue. And no, they should not use whatever Tokyo and Seoul use because I mean they should use Europeanizations of that. But the European and the Japanese rolling stock markets are way too different. Yeah, they should merge, but that's a free trade agreement. That's not a. Yeah, Chicago will not always need custom stock. Chicago can just buy whatever everyone else has. What you think is customized is extremely modular. I mean, the vendors are aware of things of differences in loading gauge. They're aware of differences in electrification. They're aware of differences in platform height. They're aware of all that. And it's still much more standardized, even with these changes, even in track gauge, than our metros. Metros, I mean, you saw the Victoria line. I mean, the tube in London is legendarily cramped and has these circular roofs that are supposed to make you feel claustrophobic. And no space for air conditioning in tunnels that are overheated. Not even overheated in the sense of too much heating, just in the sense of they're deep underground and and you'd expect the temperature underground would be fine because the average temperature underground in London, I mean, it's not hundreds of meters underground. I mean, it's what, 20 meters if that. So it's the same temperature as the average on the surface. It's a difference between land and sea, right? The difference is that the reason that temperatures over the ocean are more moderate than over land is that over land, essentially the entire seasonal difference in temperature is in the top meter, and then in the sea it's much there's much more mixing. It's much deeper than that. But the opposite is also over land. If you're more than about a meter below ground level, the temperature is just going to be the annual average. And in London, the annual average is maybe 10 degrees. So they thought, ooh, it's like it's going to be cool in the summer, and then generations of trains passing through and heating the air dumped a lot of kinetic energy into heat energy, and now the temperature there is in the 30s, and not the low 30s either. So even with that change, the vendors are aware of weird shit like that. Again, that's a metro issue. With rolling stock for commuter trains, you need to be a lot more standardized, which is something that I don't think a lot of people are. How much more standardized? I would say light rail is even more standardized, by the way. Okay, this is a new question. Do longer trains take longer to decelerate than shorter ones? It depends. If they're if they're multiple units, which means, in theory, multiple units are defined as every every car is powered, then it is independent of length. Now, in practice, multiple units tend to have a combination of powered and unpowered cars. Essentially, you can power every car, but then you'll have way too much power for the needs of most commuter trains. So yeah, you would do it on, say, the Shinkansen, because then you need much more power. And on European high-speed trains, you will power, I think, every other car, so that then the unpowered cars get some traction equipment that can't fit into the powered cars without going over weight limits. But with commuter trains, it's going to be a combo of powered and unpowered cars, but the ratio is generally independent of length. Again, it's usually about half the cars are powered, so there isn't going to be a difference between, let's say, a 4-car train, 2 powered to unpowered, and a, let's say, and a 12-car train, which is essentially which is essentially 3 of these 4-car trains running in triple traction, and then again, half are going to be powered and half are going to be unpowered. The deceleration and acceleration rates are not going to be different. This is not, by the way, a new question. It's not just a good question, it's a very important question for understanding why the differences between multiple units and locomotives work the way they do. Locomotives, of course, would generally not take longer to decelerate if the train is longer, but they would take a little longer to accelerate. Sure, but remember that the high-speed trains do have often all cars powered on the Shinkansen, and in Europe they probably would if European technology worked like in Japan, where in Japan it's smaller. Each axle is a separate motor, so it's many small motors. And in Europe we instead have big motors that are the entire train, and they also need extra traction equipment in the unpowered car. I mean, at the end of the day, a Velaro or a Zephyr or one of these trains that can draw 20 megawatts of power if it's a 400-meter train. And the overhead catenary can provide that. I mean, they need to get overhead that's designed for high-speed trains for that, but they can do that. That's not the main difficulty of building a high-speed train. And of course, a commuter train would never suck 20 megawatts, because first of all, the commuter trains are never that long, because the whole point of commuter rail is it's a very open system. You don't just build a few lines, you have to be compatible with a lot of legacy shit, and therefore you're not going to be running these absurdly wide trains. Usually the longer S-Bahn RER systems, they're trains of 200 and a bit meters. So first of all, it's for a high-speed train of that length is not 20, it's 8 to 10 megawatts, and second, why would you do 8 megawatts on such a train if it's a commuter train? I mean, 4, maybe 6 are enough. If that makes sense. I think actually maybe in Switzerland, the maximum power at rail, if you do 2 kisses combined, might actually hit 12 megawatts, because the kiss is 4 megawatt continuous 6 maximum. But that's a 6-car kiss. That's 150 meters of kiss. I don't actually know if they ever run 300-meter kisses in Switzerland. But again, the KISS is designed to, first of all, it's bilevel, and second, it's an extraordinarily powerful train. I mean, certainly extraordinarily. I mean, there are equivalents made by all the manufacturers, but it's specific. But it's used if you're trying to run at 160 kilometers an hour and accelerate a lot. Oh, Sky, how much will platform lengthening be necessary? Okay, so you're asking me a specific question about a specific line. Okay, on this line, run trains that are 10 cars. 10 cars, so in America, commuter rail cars are all the size of high-speed rail or bilevel cars, 25 meters. In Europe, typically we have 18-meter single-level regional rail cars. So what you're telling me is 250 meters. 250 meters is fucking huge. Yeah, if you can do 300, then do 300. Build future infrastructure designed for 300, but that's because New York isn't usually massive. 250 is basically okay. Like, don't sweat that it's only 250. Even saying only about 250 is kind of ridiculous. The Parisian trains, which to be very clear are busier than the New York ones, the ORB is about 200 and is I think 209, and the ORA is 220 something. So yeah, that's fine. Just the most important thing for New Jersey Transit is to be able to build Gateway for capacity, and for everything else, just essentially, other than that, everything it needs is just better coverage, by which I mean getting the Erie lines into Manhattan in a sane way, and much better service for things that are not 9 to 5 commuter trips to Manhattan. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And Crossrail is about this. The is I think also about 220. For the extension to the west. Munich is 200. Berlin is 130 something, or no, it's 150. But Berlin is old. I don't know what city is built to. Stockholm is 240 or 50 is I think the standard. And the current trains are 214. Should all sub 200 platforms be lengthened? In New York, definitely. In Boston, I can see some cases where you might leave 6-car platforms as they are in some cases, but in New York, you have to. You have to have minimum of 8 cars. Large city. So yeah, I don't actually know where the sub 200 meter platforms are. I mean, I'm sure that I have track maps that say that, just have not memorized the track maps. I'm sorry. I don't actually compulsively memorize everything, just some things. But yeah, generally this is what you would expect of a big city commuter rail system, and big city could even mean mentioned, doesn't mean mega city. In Tokyo, by the way, in Tokyo generally it's 200 meters. I think Shonan Shinjuku is 300. It's normally 200 or 220 in Tokyo. I think Istanbul and Seoul are also about 200, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, if you have the infrastructure for 300, do 300, but don't sweat it if you only have 200 or 250. Boston, by the way, built to a standard of 240, 800 feet. So essentially it's easy 9-car trains or 10-car trains if you somehow if you creatively make sure you have quarter point doors and you align them just perfectly so that they don't hang over. Then and that should be much more than enough. Remember, something for like my American viewers is that not all, but nearly all of the difference between the ridership that your commuter rail systems get, New York, Chicago, Boston, even Philly, and the ridership that we get in Berlin or Stockholm, Paris, whatever, practically all of that difference is off-peak and trips that are not to city center, either through city center or short of city center. Montclair Bond, if Montclair, I shouldn't say Montclair Bond, right? Montclair Bunton. Okay, then lengthen these. Not that big a deal. I think you need to rebuild a lot of these anyway because they're low platforms. And it's really important to have high platforms everywhere so that you don't have problems with people spending too much time boarding the train. It's kind of insane that New Jersey Transit has not already gone full high platforms. It absolutely should. Don't even wait for Gateway, just do it now. It makes Gateway stronger, so it makes it easier to fund Gateway. That's essentially the New Jersey issue. I think it's a lot. In general, I think there's this kind of, oh, we can't do this before Gateway. First of all, yes, you can. And second, all of these surface improvements make the Central Regional Rail tunnel more attractive because it's going to feed into because it's going to connect a stronger system. So please do that. It's the same as true, and the same is true of regional rail improvements in Boston, prepping for the North-South rail link. Surface improvements are often bundled with these tunnels because they help each other. They're synergistic this way. But even if you don't have the organizational coordination to do that, just do one of them. Usually the surface improvements are easier to start with, and then you're just guaranteeing that the other project will have a higher benefit cost ratio when the time comes to analyze it. I can't actually tell whether these stations have low or high platforms. This looks high, but I can't actually tell. Starts here maybe, and then yeah, this is kind of a short platform. It's 160 meters, so I guess you will want to continue the platform. I guess you'll want to continue it a little bit here, closer to the level crossing, so that gets you about 109. Gets you up to about 190. Obviously, you should not have a platform through the level crossing. And then on the other side, you'll need to have a little curve on the platform, which is not ideal, but I mean, there are waivers. Yeah, you can do this. You can do this. Am I answering your questions, Kenny? Same thing with Walnut Street, right? I mean, the space you have starts maybe around here. Oh my god, are they having like a low platform all the way to the thing? Okay, whatever. Start even here maybe, and then go, if it's 250, you go up to about here. Yeah, that's fine, you can do that. Again, it's a platform on a curve, but you should not have platforms on a curve unless, and when I say unless, what I mean is, unless there's a constrained urban station. This is constrained. This is kind of urban. Yeah, this is where waivers exist. In Germany, you're not supposed to have these, but somehow there are many of these. Same is true of, let's say, curved turnouts. You're not supposed to have them, but in practice, you can't avoid them. So it's kind of weird. They keep talking about how mainline rail is very standardized, but on the other hand, basically everything is on a waiver. Are there other questions? Oh. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, oh, with what I said, yeah, you probably would want to lengthen trains to, I'm guessing, about 10 cars. Beyond 10 is, I mean, think what they would be connecting to, right? Because especially, when I talk about running in New York, I mean, I'm assuming that New Jersey mostly does not run to the LIRR, because the LIRR can mostly just be, like, its own thing that, let's say, runs through to, which means they need to redo Jamaica, runs through to Brooklyn, or runs to Grand Central, and then you want as little as possible interaction just to be able to timetable better. Because, yeah, through running is nice, but it's much more important to have, I think, consistency in where the lines run. So, from Long Island, it's nice to run through Manhattan, but and then get to Newark or something, but then if it means that you have, let's say, a line from Newark to Jamaica, then you're forcing everything to run through here, and then it's going to be annoying to run through the Northeast Corridor, and I think it's more important to run through the Northeast Corridor than to Long Island. So anyway, my point is that probably under my usual through running crayon, let's do the smaller one, the 6-line one, not the 7-line one. The 7-line one is called V3. It's this one. There's a new line there. So this, the point is that the stuff that runs through from Jersey, I guess with this line 6, then it is Long Island, but if you pretend this line doesn't exist for a moment and you just do 5 lines, then this is colored green. So this essentially runs through to Metro North territory, and Metro North doesn't really have long platforms either. It's 8 or 10. Usually it's not, I don't think they have anything longer. I think the LARR is mostly the one with the very long platforms. Yeah, I can see Newark Broad Street specifically being lengthened, but because you would not do selective door opening at Newark Road. But generally you would want 8, maybe 10. Again, don't worry about 12. It's unusually long to do 12. Again, if you're trying to build a new cavern station in Manhattan, you might want to do 12 car. You want to do 300 meters, just and spend the extra money just for future proofing. But this means that the cavern is going to be 300 meters and barely more. Don't do what they did with Second Avenue Subway with these 300, 400 meter long caverns for trains that are never going to be longer than 180 something meters. If the trains might be 300 meters, the cavern is like 320 meters long. That's it. Yeah, Broad Street is is capacity limited anyway. Yeah, that's fine. So, but these capacity limited ones are. I mean, the point is not that Broad Street is the most important terminal or something. It's that Broad Street is a branch point, and that it's and it still is a not quite downtown but downtown-ish Newark station. So, would be nice to make sure that you can to try to rebuild to make this longer, if at all possible. But again, it's not. I mean, if for some reason you cannot do more than 8-car trains, you can do 8-car trains. That's fine. What is this? This is much more than 8-car train. This is an almost 11-car train. Yeah, this is shorter. This is. Yeah, this is an 8-car train. You might be able to squeeze like a 9th car if you drive very hard, but don't. Yeah, exactly. It is. Yeah. Sorry. Are there other questions I should ask? Oh yeah. You could extend you can extend the island, or you can stop running. I mean, I don't think they should be running these express trains anyway, and then they can build a side. Oh, a question about my crayon. What is the logic? Oh, good question. So let me reboot my crayon for a moment, because this is not it's actually one of the least speculative elements in it. So the orange line here is part of something called Penn Station Access West, which I think was descoped from Penn Station Access, but is at least something New York might be interested in it at some point. So the plan is to only have these 2 stations, 62nd and 125th. So I want to explain the rest. So about 158th and Dyckman, yeah, there's no connection to the subway, but this is where the street network gets very close to the tracks. This might be too constrained for a station, and I hope it's feasible to build this, because here you have buildings that go right next to this. Now, there's no connection to the subway, and this is annoying, but it's not about the connection to the subway, it's about letting the people who live here and have long commutes via the 1, which is a very slow train, or have to walk over to the C, which is another slow and also infrequent train, and instead giving them a faster option that gets them to Penn Station. So it's for all the people here to have another train. Now the 1 is not overcrowded. It's the least crowded of the numbered lines. But the 1 dumps its traffic at 96th Street, and then people connect to the 2-3, which are overcrowded. They're currently the most, and by currently I mean as of, not just as of the eve of Corona, even before 2nd Avenue subway opened, the 2-3 were somehow more crowded at the peak than the 4-5. Of course, post 2nd Avenue subway, the relative difference has increased. Or again, they can get to the C, which is another line that is not crowded but is very slow, and then the next express line they connect with the AD is also very crowded. And essentially the same is true of Dykeman, except that here it's even a longer commute for people from Inwood. Now, Dykeman is kind of a worse location. The development doesn't get as far as here. It's just that here, even though the subway is closer, you save more time, even if you do take the 10 minutes to walk from here to this location. This is why I'm proposing this. So it's here and here. Here with the transfer to trains over the bridge is very speculative. I can see this happening, but it is kind of weird. 125th is also not connected to the subway, but first of all, a 125th Street crosstown could hit there. And second, there's a lot of development here. This is the new Columbia campus that is being built. These are housing projects. And 62nd, it's just already very dense. Oh, why no questions? What do you mean no questions between 48th and 125th? I mean, 42nd, 62nd. Why no questions? Why no stations here? Because here, the savings relative to the subway are not as large, essentially. Like, the value of express trains increases as you go farther. So essentially here, let's say a station at 79th Street or 86th Street, people can just take the 1, and they're likely to stay on the 1, because if they change to the 2-3, they change at 72nd and not 96th Street, and this means that they might not gain anything from changing, so they're going to stay on the 1. Again, the 1 is kind of slow, but the 1 is very frequent, and the 1 is under full here. So I think it's less important. In the plan with West 158th, would I de-interline? Yeah, this is separate, the subway de-interlining, but yeah, so I've had this de-interlining crayon, but the de-interlining crayon in New York, so for people who have read me and watched me know what de-interlining means, but for newer viewers, I want to reiterate that. Interlining or something called, I sometimes call it reverse branching. Actually, let me put this in because it's basically unavoidable in commuter rail, so I might as well explain with this example. Normal branching or normal interlining is when you have one trunk that branches in the, farther out. So let's say this yellow line, which I consistently call line 5. This is a trunk. In this crayon, it's from Jamaica to Brooklyn is the existing section. Brooklyn to this junction is new station section to be built, and then from here to the northwest it already exists. So you have this crayon trunk, and then in Jersey it splits into a bunch of branches. That's normal branching. Same as on this side. Reverse branching is when you have two trains that share tracks outside the center and split in the center. For example, it's not exactly two trains of two different colors, because, for example, it's not depicted well on the map, but the purple trains, the R6, run express on separate tracks from the orange trains, which run local. And you can see this with some of these trains that are said to be only R3X, not R6X. This is an express station. But sometimes, even then, two trains of separate colors share track, and you see this on this section, that red train, so R14 and the green train, R24, would share the local tracks here, and then the R14 runs as the local here. and the green train runs as the local here. So they're separate through the core. This is reverse branching. Again, it's not a good practice, but on a complex commuter rail system, it's basically unavoidable. Paris and Berlin both have it, and they're unusually unbranched on the metro, on the metro and the U-Bahn. New York has the same kind of thing on the subway far too much, and it should work to eliminate that. For example, the Queens Boulevard line has on the express tracks a blue train and an orange train, right? You have the E, a blue train, which goes to 8th Avenue, and the F, an orange train going on 6th Avenue. This is not very good for reliability because one delayed train delays other trains on many lines. This is something that mainline rail systems have had to deal with. I'll answer you in a moment, Sonny. This is something that mainline rail systems have had to deal with for a long time. This is why they have lower capacity, they have different way of keeping to schedule. On urban rail, you want to avoid it. This is also something you will try to reduce when you're trying to run commuter rail more as urban rail on the more urban rail side of or S-Bahn service. Again, more Berlin, Paris, which are both very urban, and less, let's say, Zurich, which is on the less urban, more regional side of S-Bahn. So de-interlining in New York is, I think, useful. It's useful for increasing throughput, increasing reliability. All of these things that are not visible to passengers but are much more important than a one-seat ride. And so, if you do this on Central Park West, it depends on what other lines are being built. So maybe you want Washington Heights to get the express trains initially, and the Bronx branch here to get the local trains. Right now, again, it's split. But if something like this is built, or if there's other lines here that are being built as part of a bigger subway system, maybe you want this to be local, this to be express. Again, it depends. Okay, is Albany too far to be served by Metro North? Yes, Albany is way too far for a commuter train to New York, or a regional train to New York. It's actually a good distance for an intercity train, and the thing is, the population density on the East Coast is high enough to the point that you can have regional systems overlap. For example, the New York and Philadelphia ones already meet at Trenton. I can see a future in which New York and Boston ones meet somewhere in southern Rhode Island, or the Philadelphia and Washington ones meet somewhere in northern Maryland. The population density is not as high inland. There's very little between the New York metro area, let's say its northernmost end is Poughkeepsie. From Poughkeepsie to Albany, there's Kingston. First of all, Kingston is on the West Shore line, and we're talking about the Hudson line. We're talking about the line on the left bank, not the right bank of the Hudson. So, north of Poughkeepsie, you have Hudson. That's it. I guess there's Rhinecliff, which is it's here, but look at what's in there. It's basically nothing. So that's an intercity train, and if the intercity train moves and doesn't stop here, nobody would miss it. I mean, I'm sure people here would complain, but they're not an important part of the ridership. So there's no real need to have any kind of regional train north of New York going past Poughkeepsie, or past, I guess, Wassaic around here, on the Harlem line. Around Armenia, and so Armenia. And so, yeah, I don't think there's a point in serving Albany as a commuter rail destination. Yeah, if you have a river crossing, to Kingston, yeah, they should have done a lot of things during the pandemic that they didn't because they panicked, and all of the workers died, so they couldn't accelerate construction the way they did in, for example, Berlin. Yeah, Wassaic is the northern extent of the Harlem line, and it's served by a handful of trains per day. Ridership on the diesel tail of the Harlem line is extraordinarily low. But also the diesel tail is much shorter. The electrification of the Harlem line goes as far as southeast, which is just north of Brewster. I think it's this park and ride. Yeah, here. And then beyond Southeast, there's practically no ridership and practically no service. Um, Hudson Line is the exact opposite. The electrification doesn't extend this far north. It only extends as far as Corton Harmon. No, I was thinking Corton Harmon. And on the other hand, the ridership on the diesel tail is very substantial, to the point that it should be electrified. Yeah, because the development of the Hudson is, these are not railroad suburbs. The railroad suburbs are not this far north. The railroad suburbs are in Westchester. Maybe they've pushed into Putnam, but like Yorktown, like Yorktown. I don't actually remember which. Is Yorktown Heights northern Westchester or northern Westchester or southern Putnam? I don't remember. Like these are the north. This is kind of the northern extent of the proper suburbs. These are older towns. I mean, West Point literally was a fort during the American War of the during the, I don't know what to call it, the Slave Owners Rebellion of 1776 or something like that. So this was already an important fort then. Actually, a lot of the landowners. This was one of the few parts of the 13 colonies in the north, at least, that had landlordism, with essentially with Dutch-style patrons who owned land that other people tilled. This was a very Tory, very pro-UK. Originally, the UK was the interest of was representing the interest of absentee of idle landlords in the north, and the U.S. was representing the interests of the slave owners in the south, plus actually working wealth in the north. So it's people who thought, so it's essentially, it was a contest between people who thought that black people were too stupid to be citizens and people who thought that people without property rights were too stupid to have any rights. And so all of these are old places. West Point, Newburgh, Kingston, Poughkeepsie. Yeah, exactly. So this is not about the railway. This is pre-railway. You can even see a bunch of that in New England, because so New York heavily industrialized into the 19th century. New England did as well, but less so. New England has older development. And so and there was less of a New York style massive redirection of development toward the city as a Long Island. Of course, you can see some of it in Long Island, where you have all these old towns that were settled by sea. So you have Plymouth, you have all these towns on the Greenbush branch, and I mean, you can kind of see that there isn't that much service there. I mean, yeah, there might be a railway, but not a very important one. And the development exists even when there's no railway, for example, on Cape Cod. And yeah, to some extent this has moved inland because of railway suburbs, or in Boston. And you can see the same thing on Long Island, but even then you can still see remnants of the old coastal settlement. Same thing same thing on Long Island, where you can see maybe the old cores that are oriented towards sea transport, like the old core of Huntington, and then Huntington Station, which is a separate core based on where the train went, all over Oyster Bay and so on. This was actually a big crisis for the LIRR, because the LIRR was built inland as a straight rail route between New York and Boston with ferry transfers at both ends, and then an all-rail route without the need for ferry transfers opened via New Haven. I forget what opened first, New Haven, Hartford, Springfield, Worcester to Boston, or New Haven across all these rivers, which the current Northeast corridor, essentially. I think both of these opened 1840s, maybe the last bridges were 1850s. But that killed traffic on the LIRR precisely because all the historic development was along the sea, and so they couldn't survive on intermediate traffic. Yeah, they needed suburbanization for that, and now there's a lot of it, but this is suburbs from the 1950s, 60s, and we're talking about the LIRR's finances in the 1850s. Yeah. Like, the U.S. does have an interesting railway history and just a rather boring railway present, which is entirely derailment and freight railways that talk about how they're the lowest cost carriers in the world, and then you can see all the industrial accidents and disasters because they don't invest in proper maintenance, and somehow they manage to be understaffed for this, even while having very large numbers of staff, two people in a crew, two crew members to a train in the cab rather than just one as in Europe, things like that. And yeah, I mean, if you look at the past, that's when American railways get more interesting. Today it's just learning about failure. And as I said at the beginning of this stream, this is one of the reasons I'm more excited to talk about railway issues in Europe than in the United States. In Europe, yeah, we have failures, but in the United States, it's all failure. Are there more questions, by the way? Sorry. Anyway, I'm glad you find this interesting. Did I freeze? I think my video froze. If people don't have questions, we can absolutely make it a short stream, by the way. Of course, if you're on YouTube, you know how long this is because YouTube cheats and tells you the length in advance. The thing I'm not telling people about World War III, and how long it's going to be. I think you can guess. Like, I think the story hints how long it's going to be, but it's subtext. But YouTube, it's very simple. You can just see exactly the length. And we're going to do another call for questions if people have any. Meanwhile, I'm going to do unpaid advertising for my own event, which is this. There are 62 people who are, so it is the Transit Coast Project conclusion. I guess you're not going to copy paste this, right? Especially if you're on YouTube. So let me show you this on Mastodon and hope that I haven't gotten any sensitive DM. I have not got any sensitive DM. I don't mind showing something on my public Mastodon about someone complaining about No Time to Die, which is understanding has already been kind of poorly received. This is so scroll down to a toot from 3 days ago. That's the link, or it's on my website. It's currently my most recent post. You can look, and there is a link to the RSVP form. There are, as mentioned, 62 confirmed attendees. I know the number here says 63. I know someone who accidentally RSVP'd twice. So please come. This is going to be this Friday, which means in 3 days if you are in New York City. It is 3/3 at 3 p.m. Please do watch. This is going to be uploaded on YouTube if we figure out how to record, which we should. It's not just going to be my technical skills, it's going to be the technical skills of people who've done this before. And please do come. You can ask questions. It's going to be about construction costs. and about our report. It's not going to be random musings about World War III Rail or Mainline Rail, or even Mainline Rail. It's not going to be. It's not going to include references to leopards and Ukraine, or video games. I don't think. And yeah. So anyway, are there more questions, or should we stop this? For the record, don't feel like you're keeping me from something if you're asking more questions. Okay. Okay, if there are no questions, then we can end this now. Thank you all for watching. Thanks for the questions. Sorry about the unusual time. Usually, I am available at 7 in the evening, Berlin time, 1 in the afternoon, New York time, but I had a meeting. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you. I don't know if I can stream this Saturday. I don't know if I can stream this Tuesday. I expect that I will be able to stream in a week and a half. I always upload the streams. The only time I don't upload the stream is if it's me pitching something that is not to be recorded, or if the recording cuts out because of lack of disk space, and I did remember to check that I have enough disk space. So thanks, Sani. And yeah, I will see you all. I don't know, again, if it's going to be... Again, I doubt it's going to be this Saturday. It might be in a week. If not, then I guess in a week and a half. Saturday is... I think Saturday is, yeah, on the 11th I should be. Yeah. So thank you all, and ciao ciao.